Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Becoming Unshakable podcast. And today I am so excited to bring onto the screen Clay Novak. And somebody that I've trusted for years and years referred me to him just the other day. And she's like, and he's been on 5 tours and he's a retired veteran and he's disabled and jumps out of planes and helps people. And I'm just like, okay, bring him on because he sounds pretty unshakable to me. So welcome, Clay. That's why you're here.
Well, thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate the invitation, and it's nice to be here.
So what does becoming unshakable mean to you personally and professionally?
I spent a long time in the Army on active duty, and I'm right at the heart of the war on terror generation. Like you mentioned in the intro, I did Afghanistan 3 times. I did Iraq twice, and I did it at such a tactical level that you get into a lot of situations where other people's life, limb, safety, sanity, security depends on leaders being unshakable. In the worst of conditions, you have to be able to think, you have to be able to communicate, you have to be able to react because lives depend on it. And it's, that's one of those things that you have to, I equate it to combat sports in the sense of boxing, MMA, those kinds of things. When I was a commander, I used to ask my brand new lieutenants if they had ever been in a fight before. Someone that they, in a bar, someone they didn't know. And, I'm not talking boxing at one of the academies. I'm talking about a real fight. And surprisingly, many of them said no. In fact, very few of them had actually ever been in a fight. I was a kid running around the city streets of Chicago. I got in a few scrapes when I was a teenager, but what I tried to relay to all of them is that the first time that you get shot at is very similar to the first time that you get punched in the face. When you get punched in the face, there's a big flash of white behind your eyes. You lose situational awareness, and all you're trying to do is, defend yourself and survive. But when you're a leader, you've got 30 other people that are depending on you to be unshakable, to be able to react, even when that flash of white is behind your eyes and you're trying to gain situational awareness. Because if you can't, and if you don't, then other people's lives are at stake. So I would train them. I would train all of us, my entire organization, as hard as I could, physically, mentally, emotionally, to be able to react, to try. And you can't replicate a firefight until it happens, but you can make the conditions tough enough in training to give them that confidence that they'll be able to react that well and be, in your terms, unshakable when it really counts.
So then this is me. I'm curious. I'm curious. This is so interesting. So when you think about, putting them in a situation, is it the reps that prepares them to make them more unshakable in your mind? Is it the confidence that they gain by doing the reps, maybe a combination of both? Are there other tactics that allow them to stay grounded in the face of because most of this sounds a little superhumanish to me, right? So what do we do to put that in, to make them be able to do that?
Right. So progressive training is a concept that the military has used for years and years. So you start very small and you build and you make it more and more difficult. Just in the sense of, say, if you're doing a live fire exercise where you've got people maneuvering and shooting real bullets, well, you go through and you do that in the daytime with no bullets. You do it at night with no bullets. And then you do it in the daytime with blanks. And then, with blank rounds. And then you do it at night with blank rounds. And then you do it in the daytime with real bullets. And then you do it at nighttime with real bullets, which is the pinnacle, right? So there's that, right? Progressive training model gives them the reps and the confidence. But I would also do things like, on Friday afternoons, I would take all of my officers and we would go play sports, and we would play physical contact sports, and it was, it's not like we were playing football with helmets and pads, but we were playing full contact type sports. And I had female officers that worked for me too, and they were right in the mix with the boys, and they didn't take any crap and dished it out as good as they got it. But I would do that to test their temperament. Sometimes the reaction of that shot, that physical contact, you get a different reaction. You may have somebody in training who's calm as a cucumber on the radio until there's physical stress that happens to them, and then their reaction is different. But then also at the end of the day, after all that physical contact and competition and all that type A, coming out of everybody, we would stop at the end and we would have a beer, we would have a Gatorade, we would have a water, what everybody chose. And then there would be the camaraderie afterwards, because you've got to be able to, if you have an incident or if you have a point where you get so out of your own self and out of control, you've got to be able to stand around your peers and your superiors and even your subordinates and come to grips with that. And you've got to be able to own it. You've got to understand that you can make a mistake and you can recover, and it is okay, especially in an environment like that.
So it's like going through the reps to help build confidence, but then testing the boundaries and making sure that you're looking at it from a multifaceted view. So that the mental, the physical, all of the things, so that you're
All of it.
filling for all the gaps that could potentially pop up in the real life situation.
As best I could. That was the
Yeah.
I did the best I could.
Was there ever a setup or setback or a mistake or something that happened to you that really changed everything about how you lead now?
I would tell you that for everyone, for every leader, every military leader, the first time that you experience a fatality, whether it's due to just a fatality in training, a fatality in combat, a fatality due to accident, a fatality due to just the conditions of war, whenever you experience a fatality, that changes you. It changes how you think. It changes the gravity of what you're doing, and it puts a lot of things in perspective. Especially when it is someone that you can be a leader, you can be a member of an organization, and you can have somebody pass away or get killed that you may not know, that you may not have contact with. You've got such separation between you and them that you don't, really know, even if you are in a position of responsibility. But when it's someone that and it's someone that when you hear their name, their face, their voice, that changes every leader that I know when you have that happen. And again, it's not exclusive to combat. It happens in training. Unfortunately, the Army and the military is a dangerous business, and training fatalities do happen. But when you have that proximity to death, I think as a leader in that great, that kind of grave profession of arms, I think it changes everybody.
I know that it takes a whole bunch to be an Army Ranger. So, but what made you even go the route of just going into the military? And what do you think were the steps to success to get you to the point where you're at the top of the heap there with the Ranger spot?
Yeah. So I come from a military family. I had two grandfathers who fought in World War II. One was in torpedo bombers in the Pacific off an aircraft carrier. The other was in B-17s over Europe. My dad served in the Air Force during Vietnam. I grew up around a bunch of Vietnam, World War II, and Korea era men. My dad and I belonged to a shooting club that I still belong to as an adult, and it was filled with those guys. So I was around that my entire life. It was really no shock to anybody when I joined the military. Now, the path that I chose was very, very different. I enlisted initially in the National Guard to help pay my way through college, and I fell in love with the Army as enlisted as a private, and I chose to be an infantryman because that's what was local, or that's what was close to where I was going to school, right? It's a little bit of geography, but I really did love the physical challenge of it. But I didn't really like being a private. So I came back to college and I joined ROTC full time, and I decided that I was going to challenge myself, and I was going to continue on that path, and I was going to be an infantryman as a career. And that's what I asked for. And you don't always get what you ask for with the Army. It is what it is, but I did get what I asked for. And I went on active duty, and I knew that challenge of not just going to, but graduating from Ranger School, Army Ranger School, was in front of me. There's no getting around it. There's no, you can say no, but you're essentially committing career suicide before it even starts. So I knew that was in front of me. The things that I knew were in my favor was I'm a lifelong soccer player, and I was a runner in high school, and I had the legs and I had the endurance, the cardiovascular. I knew that my body could do what needed to be done to go through the school. The mental test is just, it is what it is. My dad gave me a great piece of advice before I went to basic training. And there are times I was never one to hide, But there are times when, truthfully, when you're 5'10" and you have brown hair and brown eyes, you can you can blend right into the crowd, right? You don't stick out at all. But I knew that in Ranger School, there's no way to hide. Everybody gets a chance to be in a leadership role. Everybody gets graded. There's no getting around it. So I never shied away from that. I was an athletic team captain when I was in high school. I took on leadership roles when I was in ROTC, and I never kind of shied away from that stuff. So when I went to Ranger School, I had my mindset that I had to graduate. There was no other option. And I went, and I lost 37 pounds while I was there, and it was the toughest 89 days of my life, and that includes 5 tours of combat. I mean, Ranger School was physically, mentally, emotionally the most demanding thing I've ever been through, even all those years ago.
So the thing that pops in my head immediately is, what do you do for yourself on the tough days? Like what is included in your self-leadership toolkit that there are non-negotiables for you?
So those are the days that you really have to dig deep, but those are also the days that you learn as a leader that you have to ask for help. And good leaders recognize when they have shortcomings, and they do ask for that kind of help. And so when you're in Ranger School, and it's kind of a thing throughout the Army, is you're assigned a Ranger buddy, right? Another student who you're with all the time. And so you learn to lean on that person, or you learn to lean on folks when you're having those tough days, because, and they're going to help you, and you're going to help them, because they're going to have those tough days too. You just you really got to be worried about when you both have one of those tough days, but it is what it is. So I think as a leader, understanding when you're having those challenges and asking for help, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. No one is an expert in absolutely everything, and no one has the best day ever, every single day. So you've got to be mature enough and responsible enough to understand that as a leader, you're going to need help. And there's nothing wrong with asking for it.
So good. I think that is critical. And most people will think, oh, that doesn't sound like something like with military, but I realize that that's a huge part of it. Like, it takes an entire team, and you realize everybody has their strengths, everybody plays their role, everybody has to play the role, or like you said, people can die. So it's higher stakes than maybe what happens with us in workplaces and traditional places that we might go. And so I completely see it. Did I see it prior to my son deciding to, he's been in Civil Air Patrol since he was 12 years old. So he was already kind of at the auxiliary arm working to kind of lead squadron. So that whole teamwork idea, leading, guiding, working together as a whole squadron, to me was obvious, but it wasn't obvious until he started doing that. And then I would see, oh, okay. And I'm an only child. So I tended to be more self-reliant, pull your own self by your bootstraps,
Sure.
And it probably, I'm going to be honest, I think I learned so much from that 12-year-old and him growing up to realize that it does require the team. And he realized it probably later on in his life too, that, oh boy, yeah, team is necessary. I do want to, because I don't know about you. Do you ever feel like did you then in the Ranger role, and maybe even now, do you ever struggle with this self-reliance idea, or like, oh, I can do it, I've done it before, I can pull myself up, and maybe that need to ask for help kind of goes to the background? And is there something that pops you right back into reality that, no, you can't do it by yourself?
Yeah. So command is lonely. And I learned that as a young captain. I was a captain. I was in charge of 150 paratroopers on 9/11. And then, and I was in an organization, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and we lived on a recall status. So, we would be recalled within 2 hours. We would all have to be at work with all of our gear packed, and we would have to be ready to go anywhere in the world in 18 hours. And I lived like that for a long time. But those decisions, when you're a commander, the ultimate decision rests on you. And that's why they say command is lonely. When you're kind of a junior level leader, right? Very tactical level leader, you're always surrounded by people with much more experience than you. And when you get older and you progress, and when I was I commanded a cavalry squadron where I was the most experienced person in the unit. And so it's not that I was an expert on everything, but I had the most experience. And command does get lonely, because you don't have anybody, or very few people, that you can lean on. There's always a big team, and you've always got great, perspective. You've got great inputs from all kinds of people, but at the end of the day, everybody's looking at you to make a decision, and it all rests on your shoulders. But I would tell you even more than that, since I've retired, I'm an author now and I do a lot of things to promote my books, but I work alone. And the grind of that, I would tell you, is as challenging as anything else. Getting up every day, staying focused, moving the ball forward, relying on really no one but yourself, or very little, you know what I mean? But to
I do.
really, it's my passion project. It's it's what I'm trying to do. It's tough. It's tough to do that every single day. But what I've learned is that I get to set my own schedule, and I get to, if I need to take a breather, if I need to focus on something else, if I need to change my, location, my surroundings a little bit, I have the flexibility and the ability to do that. So it's a different kind of, you're still leadership. You're still leading yourself. You're leading the progress of your own project, but you're not relying on anybody else. So there's a freedom in decision making, but there's no freedom and responsibility. It all rests on me. Yeah.
It's so interesting too, because though there's a couple things that pop in my mind. One is the level of intention. Since we just got on this call, the level of intentionality. Intention would be the way I would describe you. Like there's just like every move you made was like, yep, and I don't like this. I'm going here, and I want to do this, and so I'm going here, and I'm doing this, and I'm intending this, so I'm doing this, and so that level of focus and intentionality is just crazy, and that's amazing because those are the things I think that can be an inspirational leader because they're watching you with that level of intention and focus. They want to emulate that type of thing. You're not someone who's giving yourself breaks all the time. So I think that's extremely important. The other thing I'm thinking about is, we think about military. Oftentimes we think of it as command and control, and we do not think of it as a place that has embedded empathy and compassion. But I'd like to know from you, when you exhibiting compassionate action on behalf of another in your role there as the ranger, or just within that time in the military, made all the difference in relationship and for you as a leader.
Yeah. So one of my last assignments, I was stationed at Fort Irwin, California, which is the National Training Center. It's out in the desert. If you're familiar with the the highway between LA and Vegas, right? It's the I-15, and about 2 hours out of either one of them is Barstow, and
Yes.
you can head west out into the desert, and that's Fort Irwin, and it's a few 100,000 acres of training space. And what we were doing was units. It was kind of their last stop before they deployed. So they would come out there. They would do one final large training exercise. We lived out there, and we were evaluators and trainers, more trainers than evaluators, but we coached them. We would be the outside eyes. We would look at what they were doing and kind of give them, hey, listen, we see this every month. A new unit comes through here. You're in good shape here. You probably need to improve this, and here's a way to do it. Right. So that was our job. And so I had a team of 50 something folks that worked for me. And, you're out there for 2 weeks straight. And so you'd go out for maybe 3 or 4 days. You'd come back, shower, change, get some more supplies, and then you would go back out to the desert. Maybe you get one night, or probably out of a rotation of 10 to 14 days, you'd maybe get 2 or 3 nights in your own bed. Well, I had a day where it was, I was on my way in. It was, my night to go in and shower and change and sleep in my own bed. And we had a fatality. I had a sergeant who worked for me who was driving, and he rolled his vehicle, and he died in the accident. Again, training related accident. And I knew that I had been out there for 4 days at that point, and everybody knew that. We were all on a calendar. It was very managed on who was in and who was out, and so we always had coverage and those kinds of things. And so I had to go. I had to go be with his family. I had to go make that notification. I had to talk to some of my own leadership, and I still had to go back. I had to clean up. I had to resupply myself, but I also went right back out to the desert, because my team, those 50 folks, they all knew that individual. They were all friends with that individual. And that night, I spent the night making sure I moved a couple of times that night smaller, to each of my smaller organizations and checked in with folks. And I knew who he was close with. And I specifically went and checked in with those folks. And they knew, they knew I didn't have to say anything. It's not like I was trying to, oh, well, I'm out here. I'm supposed to be back. I'm supposed to be asleep, but I'm out here. I didn't have to do any of that. I didn't have to say anything because that organization knew and understood, what was going on. But I made sure that I was out there for those folks and for months and truly even years afterwards, I have had individuals from that organization bring that up to me and say, sir, that night when so-and-so passed away, and you came back out and, you kind of hung out with us and we, kind of sat around and we're just out there together. It was really important. So compassion is important. And when I say I went out there, like this was a, drive back in 45 minutes in a Humvee covered in dust, drive back out 45 minutes, and then make a bunch of 45 minutes to hour and a half drives around the training area to get to all of these subunits. I mean, I don't even know if I slept that night, but it was important. And you've got to show as a leader, you've got to show that compassion. The one thing that I caution people against is that you yourself as a leader have got to allow your own time to process those kinds of incidents. If you don't, there's a price to be paid, truthfully. And I spent, you said it, I spent a lot of time in combat. I went to a lot of, we used to call them ramp ceremonies where, you're putting a deceased service member on an aircraft or on a helicopter or whatever, whether they're going to a hospital, whether they're injured and going to a hospital or they've been killed in action and they're getting processed and sent home. I spent a lot of nights at those. And I never really allowed myself at times to process or even grieve people that I knew because, one, I put the organization ahead of myself, which you've got to do as a leader, but also out of a little bit of ignorance, as I thought, I got this, I can handle this, I can manage this. Not really understanding the composite, the continuing tally that was building up and building up and building up. So you've got to take care of yourself. As much as you need to take care of your organization and the individuals in it, you are one of the individuals in that organization, and you do need to take care of yourself. So for leaders, you can't take it all on. You've got to show some compassion to yourself at the same time, which is a very, very tough balance to find.
It sure is. And it's a huge foundational thing as it relates to becoming unshakable, in my estimation as well. So I am curious for you, Clay. What does a bad day look like for you? And what do you do to kind of reground yourself, recenter yourself so that you are able to show up as this intentional, focused, compassionate leader that you know you can be?
After all of the time that I did spend some time in therapy and learned a lot about myself as a result. And simple things like making sure that you sleep can make a huge difference, which is challenging to do at times. Sleep is a premium. Breathing, intentional, focused breathe. It sounds very simple, but for me, it's one of the greatest tools I have. When I'm having a bad day, even now, stopping, breathing, slowing myself down, lowering the pulse and the blood pressure is very, very important. You can't be unshakable when you're shaking. And so you've got to lower the physical so that you can deal with the mental. And so, when the heart rate's high and those kinds of things, those breaths can bring you down to a controllable level. You will start to think clearer. You can process things better and make better decisions. But sleep is one, and just simple breathing is another. And again, it sounds very simple, but we take some of that stuff for granted.
We really do. Those self-care mechanisms, the things we do to sustain ourselves is so critical. I mean, I do feel like sometimes as leaders, we over-index on the external. And like you said, the compassion we have to extend for others, the care we have to extend for others, the making sure we include all the people and their voices in the process and all. We do so much of that, which is necessary. And it's also necessary for the other part. There's just no way around it. And sometimes I think we just when we bypass that, we reduce our effectiveness as leaders too. Did you ever find yourself, were you at, I'm sure you had to, this is probably a silly question, but when you were leading all the people and all the things were going on and you're in active duty, you're on the deployments, and did you ever find yourself getting to the point of depletion where you're like, I am shaking and I'm trying to lead this from an unshakable place? Did you ever have any awareness like that?
Yeah. Listen, I'm never claimed to be perfect. I'm far from it. I've had my own mistakes along the way, and a lot of it has to do with not doing those things. It was the end of a long training exercise when I was a commander, and it was a kind of a steamroll effect that we'd brought the whole squadron back in from this big training event. We were trying to account for, what we refer to as sensitive items, weapons and night vision goggles and those kinds of things. And you got to account for everything by serial number. And it's this very long process. And there were things going on, a lot of stressors, and I hadn't slept well for almost 2 weeks. And I lost my temper in public. And I really did. I lost it. It's probably one of the greatest regrets I have in my entire career, because I lost it on some very influential and important people in my organization. And I did it very publicly. And a different Clay Novak with better rest, or that had taken that time to breathe and had not let his temper get the best of him, would have handled things very, very differently. Now, learning from my own training methodology, there was repercussions, and there was apologies made, and there were things fixed. And, I had to own the mistake that I had made. So yeah, I mean, those things happen. They happen to everybody. I would tell you that if you don't get to a point as a leader at some point where you are so intense that you're worked up to that level, that you might want to see how much you really care about what you're doing. It's you can be a leader. I would tell you, if you're a leader, you love, or at least are passionate about what you're doing and the people who work for you and your mission and your organization and the focus and all of those things. If you're a manager, maybe not so much. And I think that's one of the distinctions between those two titles, leader and manager. A manager, listen, the whistle's going to blow at 4:00. I'm walking out. I've done my time, punch the clock, and I'm out. Right. And you go home and you drink a beer, and, you don't think about work until the next day. A leader, you stay past the whistle and you do the other things. And when you go home, you're, oftentimes still thinking about what you were doing, and you do carry it into the next day, and you do care. Right. And if you care that much, then at points in time, everyone's going to get a little bit worked up. I would think. If they're not, maybe I'm an oddball. But so yeah, I would tell you, if you're not that passionate about what you're doing, you probably need to reevaluate what you're doing or why you're doing it.
That goes back to my mind to what you said earlier about testing your boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think it's like testing your boundaries could also mean testing your commitment, which is kind of that is intriguing, Clay, because it's like I'm thinking through my work right now, and there's a lot of work, and I'm thinking about, like, how do I simplify? And part of this is a recognition of, like, that something has to change, a recognition of it, and figuring out what that it is and what we do next. But I like this idea. I think it's a good challenge to us to say, we're all going to reach this spot, and we can use it as a learning point. So it's a boundary test, and it's a commitment test, and it's not saying we want to stay there long term, but it does serve to teach us, right? So it's just like every time we get there, like, those things they're learning moments, and what do we choose to do with it? So good. So for somebody who might be out there right now, and they're kind of just stirring, they're maybe they feel like they're barely holding it together. What would you want them to hear today specifically? What message would you like to deliver to them?
Somebody else has been in your position before, and they've made it through. You're not. Very few people are breaking new ground. As bad as things can seem, as challenging as they are, as heavy as your load feels, someone else has been in your position and they've made it, which means you can make it. And that was my mindset walking into Ranger School. Was half of every class or less graduates, but half of every class graduates, right? I'm not any better or any worse than anybody else who's ever been through this grueling experience. There's no reason why I can't graduate like all of these other people have done. So as bad as it seems, you can make it. As heavy as the load is, as you know, you can make it through. It can be done. I know things on bad days seem so ominous and heavy and dark and like there's no way this is going to be successful. You can make it. It's been done before. You're not the only person. You're not, listen, we're not splitting atoms here. You know what I mean? Like it can be challenging, but again, it's been done by someone, which means you can do it too.
What's the one thing you had to unlearn on your journey to becoming unshakable?
I would tell you that technical expertise matters. I was always very good as a young man, really through my whole career. I mean, I can relate to a lot of people. I have a pretty great background growing up. I was a suburbs kid who ran around in the city. I come from a blue collar family. I was an athlete. You know, like I do have a great varied background. I can almost always find something to relate to anyone. Like there's always common ground, and I'm pretty good at finding it. And I relied on that as a leader, as a young man. But as a paratrooper, I learned technical expertise really matters. It's very hard to stand on ground in a technical field of any kind if you don't have the expertise. And if you're a leader, you have to chase that technical expertise. You cannot just rely on technical experts. You have to know things with your own hands. You have to be able to speak the language. You have to be able to see, touch, smell things that are right and wrong through that technical expertise. So you can rely on personality, and you can rely on leadership classes, and you can rely on all kinds of things, but you have got to have a level of technical expertise that puts you in the conversation with people who work for you who are technical experts. It's very hard if you can't speak that language. You're on mute.
Learning the concept that for the technical side, the unlearning part was, oh, I don't need to know that. I don't need to learn that. I'm leading these people. You're saying in order to gain the respect, to understand where they're coming from, to be able to even to solve for things, meet them where they're at, you have to know how to do the thing.
Correct. It's not beneath you. The technical expertise is not beneath you as a leader. In fact, I think it's an imperative. I never believed that it was beneath me, but I also didn't think that it was always necessary. And then again, as I became a paratrooper and learned that the very technical pieces of that skill, I realized how important that really, really is. The technical expertise.
Mm. Clay, what's the title of your book for those who are listening right now?
So I've got a series. The first book came out a couple of years ago. It's called Keep Moving, Keep Shooting. It's an action fiction series, Jack Ryan, Jack Reacher, Jason Bourne type. I didn't write Clay Novak's war stories because nobody wants to hear that. But so that was the first book in the Terry Davis series, again, called Keep Moving, Keep Shooting. The second book was released in September. That's Cross the Bear. You can see the title right there. That's the cover. Nice. And the third book in the series is coming out on Veterans Day this year. And the title of that book is Rebellious. So as a 3-book series right now, Keep Moving, Keep Shooting is book 1. Cross the Bear is book 2. And then Rebellious will come out on Veterans Day, and that is book 3.
Very cool. Well, number one, thank you so much for your long service and for helping to form other leaders in our nation. I appreciate that. I'm so glad that I said yes to Wendy. I just knew immediately she's amazing, and you are amazing. And and I think you're going to be making some appearances in my next book on teamwork as well. So
feel free.
Oh, thank you so much again for joining the Becoming Unshakable podcast. I appreciate you, Clay.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Becoming Unshakable podcast. Be well.